Dave Portnoy and Tom Brady, Fox's two most high-profile sports media stars. Getting into it a little bit yesterday, starting with Portnoy's new show, Wake Up Barstool, on FS1. In a seemingly casual conversation with John Gruden and Greg Olsen, decided to bring up what he had heard as Tom Brady's purported salary from Saudi Arabia to participate in a flag football tournament over there. Let me play you that clip, Brendan.
$75 million he got paid to do this. The fastest growing game in the world, flag football. The question obviously is, how much for each of you? Coach, to go out there and coach this flag football game? Greg, if they said, hey, old man, dust it off. We want you to get back in here, play some football. Greg, what's your price? Would you do this? And by the way, this is weird. Brady's saying anybody who's like, this was normal, it wasn't. It was weird, but go.
He got $75 million?
$75 million.
Is that real?
Yes.
Wow.
That's what I was told.
Good for him. How much for
stealing your job, stealing your flag football.
Well, we can get to the awkward position that question put Greg Olsen in a bit later. But first, Brendan, I wanna throw this back to you. Do you think this is something that Fox cares about internally, wants to address internally? You know, this is Dave Portnoy, 3 weeks into his job on FS1, calling out the highest paid employee at Fox Sports, probably the most forward-facing employee. He's calling the biggest NFL games every week, and painting him in a not-so-good light. What do you think about just Portnoy even deciding to, broach this topic on the air?
Not surprising at all, and I think if ESPN can stomach Pat McAfee doing many of the same things, then Fox Sports should, and I would imagine will be able to stomach this. Like, Fox's MO is to allow personalities to do what they're going to do and center them and hype them up regardless. So you don't bring Dave Portnoy in to just, casually discuss, James Conner's ankle surgery and what the Cardinals are going to do. You bring him in to do exactly this. Talk about the hot button issues of the day, be very, internet minded and not be afraid, no matter if it's the guy who Tom Brady replaced that's receiving the question. So none of this surprised me, and I respect the way that Olsen basically sidestepped it for the most part. And I think this will blow over pretty soundly, in my opinion. At least like this incident, the flag football game itself, which I think we might get to bigger picture here, is not going to go away. But this moment, I think, will come and go.
Right. Olsen, that was some very nimble sidestepping on his part. That might have been the most impressive part of the entire segment. Just to, paint the full picture here, Brady saw this clip online, decided to respond. I'm quoting from a post he made on X yesterday, quote tweeting the video. He said, "Are we just picking numbers out of a hat and reporting them? While we're breaking news, Elvis is doing the halftime show. Babe Ruth is going to sign some autographs for fans. Also, I heard Dave prefers floppy pizza. Who cares about the facts, right?" Clearly, that was pretty good-natured in terms of, what he could have said if he was truly, super unhappy about, Portnoy bringing this up. But it also shows, he was a bit annoyed, right? Like, this was gaining some traction on social media and felt the need to address it directly with Portnoy.
Brady doesn't do this. So, yeah, I would say it crossed the line for him in some kind of way. I think that, to set the stage even further, right? This is a project, an event that is being put on by, I'm on Fanatics.com. The press release says that it's Fanatics, of course, Tom Brady as an entity, Riyadh season, which is, whatever the stand-in for the Saudi PIF is in this particular case, and Fox Sports and something called OBB Media are putting this on. And so to circle back too to your first question a little bit here as we frame this up, Drew, is Fox can't exactly be surprised by any blowback that comes if they're helping to put this on. This wasn't simply like, talent on talent crime. Maybe you would say Portnoy should be even more careful because he, is kind of going at his own partial employer with this too. But I just think in general, like everybody participating in this, if they're not ready for criticism or teasing or mocking or outright anger, they shouldn't have done it, And so that kind of brings me back to Brady, where it is saying something that he even responded to this at all, and it shows a level of sensitivity about this that maybe he didn't expect or didn't expect it from Portnoy or values Portnoy's voice or opinion maybe more than others. I don't know. I can't read Brady's mind, but his actions tell me that he certainly cared, and I think that that's frankly kind of pathetic. Like, getting paid tons of money, what the implication is participating in something like this, and you're a really famous, high-profile guy. If you can't fight through one tweet, then it's going to be a long march to March 21st of next year when this thing actually goes down.
Yeah, that's a great point. And, maybe, if you're Brady, like maybe this is something you back channel, right? Like, why are you making this a public thing when you are the one taking, presumably tens of millions of dollars from Saudi Arabia? You're drawing more attention to the event. And, Dave Portnoy is, interestingly enough, you mentioned how Fox is, in business with Saudi Arabia. They're part of this flag football tournament. They have a media rights deal with Live Golf. Like, this is not something that the network itself is shying away from. But Portnoy, who's, I guess you can consider Fox adjacent. He's not really employed by the network, but he's partnered with them. It is kind of undermining these business relationships, right? Like, he's kind of saying that there is a bit of, a moral dilemma here when you're taking money from Saudi Arabia. That doesn't make Fox look good. It doesn't make Brady look good. And now, like, there's just more attention being drawn to it. It's just a bit of a strange way to go about it.
Okay, but attention's the point of this thing, right? Are we going to care about the final score?
Sure,
right. So it's like if anybody is nervous about attention being paid to this thing, or the optics, or how big it gets, like I'm if that's true, I'm lost. Because I've officially lost track of why we're doing any of these things, because my understanding was that there's some rich people over there who want people to pay attention to them related to some of these fun things like sports, as opposed to some of the other things that they participate in.
Sure.
I thought we all understood that that's what was going on. And so if I'm Fox, if I'm Tom Brady, if I'm anybody, you got to push through that. That's just kind of what you signed up for.
Yeah, I think you're right in that attention is the goal for, the Saudis here. They want to be associated with these things. But I think if you're Tom Brady or an individual that is accepting this money, that might not be entirely true. You're probably getting paid a premium knowing that there is a reputational risk to associating yourself with these types of events. And maybe Tom Brady, he agrees to do the announcement, the public announcement, and make it a big deal, and he'll promote it on his social channels when the tournament actually happens. But maybe he just kind of wants this to fly under the radar, in between those obligations, right? I wouldn't say
like you talk about Dave Portnoy as the messenger here. I think part of why he likely felt emboldened to be the one to call Brady out and make this an issue, regardless of the business connection that they have via Fox, is he presents us with the clear alternative pathway that Brady or any of these other players or coaches who are participating could have taken, and could still take by March of next year, which is to turn it down. And that's exactly what Portnoy and Dan Katz, Big Cat, reportedly did when they were offered money to go. It sounds like just attend and promote an event over there to the tune of $10 million. And so if I had that in my arrow in my quiver, I would totally feel comfortable throwing jabs at anybody who chooses to participate, whether it's the comedy festival they're about to do, pro wrestling events, or this flag football thing, or live golf, or the Cristiano Ronaldos of the world. Like, it is an option to just not do it. And I think especially when you talk about Tom Brady, it's a very short list of people who in sports media who need the money less than Tom Brady.
Right. And this kind of gets at to something you mentioned at the beginning of this podcast. And that's kind of the parallels here between Pat McAfee and Dave Portnoy and their relationship with ESPN and Fox, respectively. Portnoy does, as you said, kind of have the ability, the arrow in his quiver to go at Brady about this, because he did deny the paycheck from Saudi Arabia, right? This is something that was reported last week. In a similar manner, McAfee has called out countless ESPN people, Disney people on his podcasts. He had the whole situation with Norby Williamson that, may or may not have gotten Williamson fired by the network, or at least, removed from the network shortly after. He had Aaron Rodgers on to talk about Jimmy Kimmel's, alleged, alleged
connection to Jeffrey Epstein, which was not substantiated.
Right. Hard to find the right word there when it's completely untrue.
Yes, exactly.
But, it kind of gets this big picture here. These networks, ESPN and Fox, they are hiring these people with established audiences that are bringing more attention to the network, talking about the hot button issues of the day, and driving news cycles, quite frankly. But at the risk of putting your own employees, your own talent in the crossfire, right? I don't think Fox ideally wants Tom Brady being, targeted by someone on their own studio show in the mornings. So I don't know, like, if you're in the media business, if you're an ESPN, Fox, CBS executive, like, what is your tolerance for having some of your, loudest stars, targeting some of your most highest paid, high profile stars?
Well, so, okay, to sort of backtrack on my own original parallel between these two stars, I think, to McAfee's credit, he largely has kept his criticisms of anything pertaining to ESPN toward the suits. And I think in particular with Williamson, or I actually already have forgotten the name of the person who, if you connected the dots from a comment he made to Adam Schefter earlier this year, he may have been making similar comments about, related to another Andrew Marchand story about Schefter's kind of time out from the Pat McAfee show, right? It's people he thinks are leaking sensitive information about him and the ratings and the business of his own show. And so as much as it's sort of like a guerrilla warfare version of how to go about that I guess, like, response on McAfee's part, it's kind of fair game in my personal opinion. If somebody's going to go on background, talk to somebody in the media about you, I think it's sort of okay for you to respond. Pat McAfee tends to take it too far, but, like, so that's the difference. Is Dave Portnoy is going at fellow talent, right? Like, that's the differentiator here and what makes it a little bit more unique. And so I'm not here to say that, like, Fox won't have a conversation with Dave behind closed doors or try to cool this down. And it doesn't seem like Brady's actually angry or, calling for Dave to be fired or something. We're not there yet, but we may be, because these things are going to continue to happen. So I think if I'm somebody in their position, my goal is I can't go at my teammates, like my direct people that I work with, right? People who are also on air, who are promoting this network, who it's in my vested interest that people tune in to watch them, right? I don't want people not tuning into America's Game of the Week because Dave Portnoy is teasing them on Monday mornings. That's the problem that you have to avoid. Nobody cares about Norby Williamson, who likes to watch ESPN, right? They're not going to really change their opinion all that much. I think that's the difference. And what it kind of brings me to is actually leads into our next topic a little bit, because the person I wonder about here is actually Charles Barkley. Right? Like, we haven't seen what it will look like for Barkley, who has never really held back, to be in an environment where he is licensed on a network that he has teased frequently, and a network that, to me, tends to be a lot more sensitive to these kinds of dynamics, commenting on the political and social world, than TNT ever was with him, right? Like, what's it going to look like when Barkley decides to go off on some tangent late night on, let's just call it Disney Plus or wherever their show's going to end up? How does that go? And what are his motivations here? Like, that honestly was where my mind went thinking about some of this, getting ready to record today, is like, that's a wild card we haven't even gotten to see yet.
Yeah, that's interesting. It never crossed my mind when I was thinking of this story, because, the parallels between, the McAfee and the Portnoy stuff were just kind of too stark. But you're right. Like, more shows are getting licensed from outside of these, network umbrellas. So ESPN is taking in inside the NBA, and Charles Barkley has no filter, right? Like, he is willing.
Like, you don't think he would have He's pretty high on the list of people I think might have said something about Kimmel if he was on the air this week, right?
Yeah, I'd agree with that.
Week.
Yeah, no, I think he probably would have, and it's much different for him to do that on a Disney property than it is a TNT Sports. So I think that's definitely something to watch out for. And I think it's just the new reality when we're talking about the television business now. Like, everyone is, has multiple kind of allegiances, right? You might be employed by TNT and work for ESPN, or employed by Barstool but work for Fox. Like, there's so many, crossing of these wires, and it's inevitable that things are going to come into conflict. It's just a matter of, if I'm Fox, like, am I actually encouraging that type of behavior? Do I kind of like it because it creates a news cycle and it gets our name out in the press? Or do I want to, kind of tamp that down because, I don't want our biggest star coming under scrutiny? I think it's something that's just going to become more commonplace, probably more and more of a non-story when it happens. Like, even this, I don't think is a huge story, because Brady didn't really kind of clap back at Portnoy after getting his one little correction in on social media. So I don't know. I think it's just like a new normal, and this is something we'll have to get used to.
Yeah, Brady seemed more bothered by the technicality of, I actually am making less money than you said I am.
Or more.
It's sure. It's just a funny, like, place for them to actually meet with their disagreement, when the elephant in the room is the participation at all, which
Yes.
I think, Portnoy is probably more bothered by, whereas Brady just sort of sidestepped it. So, yeah, I mean, even this event itself, I wouldn't be surprised if it came up again, or similar things like this. But the whole structure of these arrangements are basically built for this type of interaction to basically backfire eventually. I don't think anyone's really crossed that line yet, but it feels like it's bound to happen.
Yeah.